5. Oh, just kidding. That was my fault.
That was you, Nicole.
Hello and welcome to the Snark Squad Pod, the media podcast where one of the things we love is being able to pay rent. I'm Nicole Sweeney.
My name is Marines.
And we are joined again by our now friend of the pod, Rich. Say hello and reintroduce yourself.
Woo! Hey, I am back. My name is Rich Camelucci, and I run a little network called Arcade Audio, and I'm on a few of the podcasts, mostly the wrestling ones and the sports ones. But yeah, we also just recently launched a new podcast called Queer Movie Night. Check that out. And then also I produce a podcast marathon in Chicago benefiting Connor's Cure, researching and hopefully defeating pediatric cancer. That's September 22nd, and you can go to arcadeaudio.net/podslam for all that information. Whew, enough up top. That's what I did.
It's an impressive introduction. So Rich is back because the last time that you were on, you sort of offhandedly mentioned Annihilation as a movie that you would like to have us discuss. And so we took that and we were like, great, but you're doing it too.
It was so offhand. And when you asked me to do this, I was like, is this because I wanted to hear y'all talking. All right.
Yes, this is totally because of that.
Well, now I got to figure out what movie or show that I want to work in next.
Right?
You know,
yeah. Casually,
really.
This reminds me so much of Boy Meets World.
No connection at all. I don't think it's going to work twice, but we'll see.
I don't know. I don't know.
I'm not going to push my luck.
Well, before we get into what connections you can make, we should start with a plot summary. So, Rich, tell the good people what we just watched.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. And there aren't 3 movies of this yet, so I only have to do the one. So, hey, how do you feel about metaphors, huh? So movie starts at the end with Lena, played by Natalie Portman, being questioned by Benedict Wong, the scientist, and not being able to really answer much about being in the Shimmer or whatever it is. Flashback, boom. What started this all? A meteor crashing to Earth, hitting a lighthouse, like in the panhandle of Florida, I want to say. Flashback to flash forward mid, I guess. Lena, she's a biologist teaching at Johns Hopkins, and we learned that her husband is in the military and he's been gone for a year on a secret mission, basically presumed dead. And just as Lena's about to spend a nice night painting the house, her husband Kane, played by Oscar Isaac, comes home, but isn't quite, himself. He takes a sip of water, bleeds into it, like you do. They are rushing to the hospital, as Kane is spitting up blood, and boom, they are intercepted by the government. And then next thing we know, we wake up with Lena at Area X. This is where we're introduced to Dr. Ventress, the boss, Shepard, a geosomethingologist. I didn't quite catch it. Anya, a paramedic, Josie, a physicist, and of course the Shimmer, which looks like that gooey stuff, that gooey metallic stuff that was in folders they sold to kids in the 90s, and we probably should have had it because it was full of mercury and stuff.
I kept seeing the cover to John Darnielle's Universal Harvester. That was what I couldn't shake that as the mental image.
It looked like a bunch of holographic Charizards just all lined up next to each other. And so we find out there's been a bunch of teams that have tried to go into the Shimmer to reach the lighthouse to figure out what the heck this even is. It just keeps expanding. Lena volunteers herself to join the next team going into the Shiver, which is basically everyone we just met. The team enters the Shimmer, which is basically their official word for this giant anomaly. And once they get in there, They experience like loss of time. They witness mutations to plants and animals, discover that the shimmer is but a prism refracting not light but DNA, all while paranoia and deception set in. And as luck would have it, many of them don't make it out. While they are also in the shimmer, we get flashbacks of Lena's life and her relationship with Kane, such as her cheating on him and him taking this mission and being very distant in his farewell, so on and so forth. Lena gets to the lighthouse after Ventress does, and this is where, in a movie full of weird and creepy shit, the weirdest and creepiest shit starts to happen. Lena watches video camera footage of what exactly happened to Kane, gets confirmation that the homeboy that did come home was definitely not her husband. And then we go down to the tunnel that was created by the meteor in the meteor in the lighthouse. And she meets up with Ventress down there. She lost her damn mind and half her face and then turned into space magma. And then this nebulous hole took a drop of Lena's blood and made it metallic. It was crazy. And then she has like a doppelganger fight, which, if at all you're a wrestling fan, it reminds you of the Doink spot from WrestleMania 9. And if you're not, it's a simple YouTube. It's very silly. And then, one of them gets set on fire, destroys the lighthouse, and with it the shimmer, and the other gets scooped up and brought back to the base. And then interpretations.
Yeah. So that was that movie that we watched. I guess the first question is, did you like this?
Oh, me? Who first?
Yeah, you haven't talked.
Okay. This is one of those weird ones to answer this question about, because of the experience is very strange and very uncomfortable almost. So I was watching it and I was definitely interested in what was happening. The story was pulling me along and I wanted to know where we were going, but I'm not sure. I feel like I need to sit with it. It probably doesn't help that I finished it like 2 seconds before hitting record on this. This is definitely a movie that you need to almost sit with for a hot second. And I'm very not confused about what I just saw, but this is going to be interesting because it's going to be a lot of me figuring out how I felt about this movie as we talk.
Yes.
I'm not sure. So this movie was adapted from a book by Jeff Vandermeer, and from what I've read, it's a loose adaptation, or it kind of strays or streamlines a lot of what Jeff Vandermeer's ideas were. I've not read Annihilation, but I have read other books. I read Born by Jeff Vandermeer, and that one is wild. It's weird as shit as well. So, and he writes in this genre, and it's called New Weird. And if you try and Google what exactly New Weird is, everyone's going to be like, I don't know. But it's to the best of my ability to tell you what it is. It's like this marriage of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, supernatural kind of horror. So even reading those books, you come away from it like, what did I just read? And also, did I like it? And I had a lot of that same feeling from this movie. Like, I don't know. I just watched the thing. Don't ask me too many questions about it.
I need to digest this.
Yeah. Rich, you suggested it, but did you like it?
Yeah, so that's super interesting that you brought up, like, this is a very loose adaptation, because so this was written and directed by Alex Garland, who also did Ex Machina with Oscar Isaac. And what he said was he read it once and refused to reread it because he wanted his interpretation to seem like a dream of the book, which yeah, like, okay, yeah, you kind of,
that's interesting,
got that.
Okay, that's one way to adapt a thing.
Yeah.
I
mean, this felt like somebody's fever dream for sure. Yes.
Imagine the wormhole you could fall into if somebody decided to only watch Annihilation once and then do an adaptation of what they thought Annihilation was.
Oh my God. Endless game of telephone. Yes.
Where you just keep bouncing back from like novel to movie to novel to movie.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so yeah, and especially when you messaged me and saying like, hey, yeah, we're still on for tonight. I'm just finishing the movie right now. Like my first reaction was, oh dear. Because the first time I watched this, I don't do this with many movies, but this movie made me like jump to the internet to like get different takes. Like I wasn't looking for any definitive answers. I just wanted different like takes and interpretations, because there is, like, I joked about it before, but boy, are there are a lot of metaphors and analogies and, you know, layering on top of things and echoes. I really did enjoy this movie for a lot of different reasons. One, the setting; two, the casting; three, the visuals; and then the story itself. Like, it was very like it was a good mystery box story, which I feel like we haven't had in a long time. There's still plenty of them, but I haven't been really satisfied by one in a long time. And so I enjoyed like that, wanting to get to the bottom of it all eventually. And I love the fact that it was a sci-fi film that wasn't afraid to like just grapple with like just really shoot for the stars for those large themes. No pun intended. It kind of like, as far as being a lofty sci-fi film, it reminded me a little bit of Annihilation. That's what we just watched, Arrival, except like with a lot more action and death bears.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. More death bears. I haven't seen Arrival, but there's volume of death bears in this movie. Definitely higher than average in film. I had an experience that was similar to these other experiences. I'm not sure how much exactly I'm going to add, except that like I had this experience, and so I now need to like process and decompress this experience that was watching this movie. I watched it last night, so I'm only doing a tiny bit better than Mari on my preparedness for this. But I think even that is still like, this is definitely, as you said, a movie that you need to sit with for a bit. Steph and I watched it, and as soon as it finished, I immediately got out my phone and we Googled Annihilation what? And we read a Slate had, you know, A+ SEO and an article on all your Annihilation movie plot questions, and a lot of it was just like very basic stuff like, did this happen? And I was like, okay, this is not what I was looking for. Anyway, I had sort of a similar feeling of like, okay, I now need to digest all the, like, I want other people's takes on this movie. I was struck too by, I would really like to hear, there's another podcast by a friend of mine that's about sort of like women in film called The Contenders, and I like, this fits the bill of something that they could talk about. And one of my friend who co-hosts this podcast is a screenwriting professor, and so I'm like, I need you to like break this down for me. I want to hear all of your screenwriting professor thoughts on this movie. But so to the actual question, I did enjoy this, is sort of how I feel about it. I think I mostly liked it. I liked all of the things that Rich said by and large. Like this cast, that was the only thing that I knew about this movie. I meant to go see it in theaters. I just like never got around to it. The only thing that I knew about it that made me want to go see it in theaters though was the cast. And I was like, great, like Tessa Thompson, Gina Rodriguez, I'm in, I don't care. Doesn't matter. I'm sold. Take my money. And like speaking specifically about Tessa Thompson and Gina Rodriguez, getting to see them, both of them, do something a little bit different than what I am used to. Like I have not seen either of them in roles quite like these, and so that was really cool to see. There were, the visuals were also very cool and weird and interesting. Like the whole experience of watching this movie was just such a trip and such a weird little journey that I fall down on the side of liking it. I'm going to be honest and say that I still don't think I get it. I'm hopeful that over the course of this conversation, I will come to a better understanding, because I feel weird being like, yeah, I liked this movie, but also, what is it about? I don't fucking know. I really don't. So I would like you guys to explain to me what this was about, and then maybe I can decide, we can ask that question mark, or maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe you'll explain to me that it's about something really terrible, and I'll be like, wow, what the fuck? I really got duped. I don't know.
For everybody listening right now and is like, why are we listening to these people who watched this movie 5 seconds ago? Like, not know what they think about this movie. I will say that for as much as you could sit there and really sit with it, digest it, and read what other people have thought about it, which, Rich is bringing that to the table. I'm really excited to kind of talk through it as well. I think there's going to be something interesting to that, coming to the table and deciding if we even like this and talking through what happened and all of that. But I also think that it's interesting that it's the kind of movie that as you're watching it or after you watch it, I had the same thought of oh, I wonder what so-and-so would think about this. I wonder what Nicole thought about this. I wonder what Rich would think about this. I wonder, you immediately get to the internet to see what people who know movies thought about this. It's just so inviting to conversation. And I think it is because it's that mystery box, and because you step away from it with that kind of uncomfortable, what did I just watch feeling. So, don't turn off the podcast yet. We're going to figure it
out. So there's, it's like a 50-50 gambit with movies like this, that when they end, you are so busy trying to figure out what it is that just happened that you can't even reckon yet with whether or not you actually liked it. I, for about 10 years, wasn't sure if I liked or disliked The Fountain from Darren Aronofsky. And then I just, in the last 2 years, finally set it on. It's Hugh Jackman in a bubble for 10 minutes. Whatever. I'm done.
That movie is like a family joke. We saw this movie with our first foreign exchange student, right when he first arrived. We went and saw this movie. Everyone was in various states of not there for the weird, the trailer totally misadvertised what that movie was. And so we went in expecting something. I didn't even want to see that in the first place. I was being bratty about it because my movie didn't get picked, whatever. It was this family thing that none of us were poised to enjoy it. And then it was fucking weird. And so now it's I cannot tell you anything about what that movie is about. I only know it as the family meme of weird esoteric shit.
Yes. I saw that with my film class in college. We all went to the theater together. And so when it ended and we were leaving, everybody was putting up a front, yeah, of course. Yeah, we all got it. And then I got home and I told my roommate that I saw it. I'm just yeah, I got nothing. I don't know. And I went and saw it again, actually. And again, years passed by. And it's I give up. But for something like this, it still has that same sort of effect Annihilation does, where it ends and you're whoa, that was a lot that just happened at the end there, and I need to parse this out. But also at the same time, was I entertained throughout it, and did I enjoy the ride? And again, on a second viewing, I feel that was more cemented for me, where I did enjoy the ride, and it was fun to kind of go back and relive some of those moments. Plus there's also everything is just so layered on, it's not layered on thick, but it's just, there's a lot of layers to this movie, where a lot of the themes and arguably the overall theme is kind of given to you in a conversation in the middle of the movie, but you can also just look around throughout the movie and see representations of that, and also the fate that everyone sort of suffers. So the by and large overall theme of the movie is self-destruction. Yes, the thesis of the movie, for sure. Yes, is self-destruction. And that's it's cool, that's a great starting point, and then you can just extrapolate upon that a billion different ways in that movie, from us being self-destructive to the planet, to how we're self-destructive to ourselves knowingly, to how our bodies always will end up self-destructing. Like there's like so many different ways you could just like really go into that thesis and prove it within this. And then like that tattoo, that little
like infinity,
which is like when you look closer, it's like a snake eating itself, which is self-destructive. And so that it is an infinity, so it's like a never-ending loop. And then I also started I should have watched it just before we started recording, because I watched it like middle of last week, and it just gave me time to like, when I had free time, just look up like what are some other things for this. And so I started going into things about the aurora boreas and like all sorts of like genetic mutations of certain, like a fruit fly can turn an antenna into a leg. I kind of went in too deep.
we gotta pull him back out.
You gotta get me out of the shimmer.
Send a team in.
Join the side where we don't know what's going on. Too shallow. The best part of that is that I definitely, my next like time I was gonna speak, I was going to throw out that I wanted us to take a stab at the thesis, even if we didn't answer it now. Like I wanted us to get to it at some point. So I like that you were like, so yeah, the thesis of this is...
Sorry.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect, because I didn't know if you guys were going to be like, don't make me do it. So that's really interesting.
I would have been like, don't make me do it. So.
I had a feeling. I still want you to answer that, but my like in between the 2 seconds from when I finished the movie and I got all set up, I kind of took a stab at it myself. And now that you say self-destruction, I'm like, yes, that is very clear. But in my head, as I was trying to like figure it all out, to me, it played out a lot in like the fear of change almost. So I found the thesis, that kind of idea in two moments. And one is when Shepard is in the canoe or whatever with Lena, and she talks about losing her daughter and how it's like grieving twice, once for the loss and then once for the person that she used to be. And then we also see something like this when we flash back and we see that Lena's having her extramarital affair. So there's, I don't know, something about the way that mirrors what's happening in the Shimmer, where people are changing in a genetic way. So I just like processed all of this about like the thesis is something, people change. It's scary, especially when you're looking at them or yourself and you don't know who's looking back, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's real good. It's real good stuff, guys.
Well,
your turn.
And to even like compliment that, which I think is a testament to the screenplay, is the fact that same scene not only establishes that and like solidifies that, but also lets you in to know, like, give you motivation and let you know what their motivation was for all of them separately, like entering into the Shimmer. Like they're all like broken people in some way, shape, or form, and feel like, whether it's true or not, they really don't have much left to lose. Another thing that I found pretty interesting was, and this might be a stretch because I haven't seen this anywhere else, but they all, like the ones that did not survive, basically everybody but Natalie Portman, kind of went out in the same way that they like basically along the lines of either their profession or the reason why they were in there in the first place. Like, so, dang it.
There was a lot of like metaphorical resonance in their deaths as well.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Like Anya was a paramedic and she basically got killed by the death bear while saving other people's lives. Josie, she, like would cut herself, and she essentially just chose to let the Shimmer take her and turn her into a bougainvillea.
Starting with her scars.
Starting with her scars.
That her scars were turned into like beautiful flowers, and
And I just kind of started to half-ass put that together, but I definitely don't think those were unintentional.
Roche, absolutely not. But also to bring us back to the shallow end real briefly, I will also say though that I find all of this very, very interesting, and I think that it's really cool that you can have this weird conversation. But I do want to reiterate that my sort of immediate reaction to say that I liked this, even though I wasn't really sure about how I felt about the totality of it, is that even there is just so much to enjoy about the ride of this movie that that you maybe aren't processing the bajillion layers to everything, but everything does still have a lot of just impact as it's happening, and so much of that is owed to the acting. The acting in this movie is so phenomenal that I even if I didn't entirely get the motivation for why the story was going in this direction at this moment, I was always curious, what the fuck is going to happen next, and B, I felt whatever the characters were feeling in that moment very intensely and deeply. And it was a ride.
I think that scene where Gina Rodriguez has everyone else tied up and the bear comes into the house is one of the most intense scenes of the year, if not the last few years, so far. It is such a good set piece. It is haunting.
I think in general, there was something haunting about all of the performances. And I almost wanted to use the word distant. There's something, I don't know, the way that all of them, especially at the beginning, are playing their parts. It's almost a little removed and a little odd, even about how they're going about introducing these characters and playing it all. And it's part of what keeps you off balance the entire time. And, as I was watching this movie, it almost felt very Frankenstein's monster-esque in that I kept picking up little things of oh, that reminds me of this. The all of the animals reminded me a lot of the Hunger Games animals, at the end that they spliced together. And then it reminded me of a book that I read called The Terranauts, where scientists go into this biome, even of other Vandermeer works. So bears are apparently a thing for him because Bourne has a giant flying bear that terrorizes a city. So I kept having these moments where I was that reminds me of that. That reminds me of that. But the way that it all came together still made something that I felt I haven't seen something quite like this, at least not in a while. So, and I think part of that is the way that the performances kind of kept you off balance.
Totally. I also got a little bit of, I see a little bit of again, the performances, especially Kane at the beginning. He's a total pod person from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And, halfway through when they're at that, at the base, you start to get a lot of the paranoia and deception starting to sink in. And that's got some of vibes from The Thing. And yeah, a lot of just nice subtle pulls from a lot of different places.
Speaking of Oscar Isaac and his performance throughout, you mentioned in your plot summary that we see the real him get blown up, but okay, was it? Because he's got this weird southern twang in that bit that he didn't have in any of the other flashbacks, or at least not that I noticed. And so I don't know. That's another weird off-kiltery thing that I was what the fuck is happening? So clearly the Kane who comes out is not the real Kane either, but he was in there for the longest,
A year, yeah.
So are there multiple copies, or not even just copies, but there's so much change, they're undergoing so much change while they're in there. So there's a Lena acquires the tattoo just from being in there, and so on and so forth. And so I don't know. I just don't know.
For all that movie was like, what is happening? There reached a point, I think about the time where Lena reached the lighthouse, that I felt like the end I felt was being a little more telegraphed, in that I reached the moment where I was like, oh, okay, I see what's happening. It's going to be a copy. Like I understood that was going to happen, that she was going to be copied. And I almost guessed that it was going to be the copy that made it out. And then that's when I put it together that, also, he got blown up. There's a copy on the outside. So all of that was coming together for me. Mm-hmm. But then as I'm watching, I'm like, oh, they're not going that direction because Lena just blew up the copy. And then you get to the very end and you're like, you are the copy? Like, it was just very like, who is what? Because I keep thinking back about how this copy made it out, because I was sure that the copy got blown up. And so I don't know who is who. I have no idea.
I also think, though, going back to sort of your proposal for the thesis about like change, like it is also definitely true that they are all being changed by the shimmer. And so this question of like who or what is the copy is there an original anymore? Like, I guess there isn't, is what I am saying. Like, I don't think that there is an original anymore.
Several times throughout their journey to the lighthouse, like, Josie says it, Lena says it, like, it's in me. Like, so it's like,
right.
Oh, all right. So it's already like the metamorphosis is already beginning to take shape. And we could probably go on and on about different like theories about what exactly happened in the lighthouse, because for me, the thing that I keep going back to, even though I think I have it figured out every single time, is that moment where she pulls, like, they touch and they both become Lena, and she pulls the phosphorus grenade, and just that look on the face of what you think is the copy is so like human and damned that it's just like, oh dang, it's just like they switched. That was the switch. It was like a transfer switch. I don't know if it's a Freaky Friday or what the particular pull would be there, but and then the fact that the one seemingly unscathed Lena leaves, but the other Lena that is now set on fire makes their way down to the tunnel and knowingly destroys the shimmer. So like, mission accomplished for original Lena to like sort of figure it out and like end it, I guess. But it also kind of like doesn't matter, because now we have two of these walking shimmers. The Walking Shimmer this fall on AMC.
And maybe original Lena also has that moment where she goes to maybe original Kane, the body, the stump at this point, and like touches the ashes. And there's also something like, mournful there, like she's mourning that person. So it would make sense if that was maybe original Lena and not copy Lena. I like your Freaky Friday idea. I'm digging it.
There's also, again, just kind of like going back to the performances, because again, the performance in that scene from Natalie Portman was also like, that's pretty tough to kind of pull off, because there's so many levels of not just as the character, like what the fuck is happening, but also portraying that like outwardly, so the audience can like still try to grasp what's happening.
Right.
But one of my favorite lines, just to kind of switch gears, as far as like performance wise goes, one of my favorite lines was in one of the flashbacks after the last time that she slept with that dude from Johns Hopkins. And he says, "It's not me you hate, it's yourself." And then she just snips back, "No, Dan, it's you too." Like,
I can hate both of us.
Yeah. That's one thing that I like super love about Alex Garland. If you've seen Ex Machina or not, like it's this very thinky, heavy movie that just in the middle of it has just this brief drizzling of like unexpected comedy that really, it gives you like a nice little like jolt to get through the rest of this otherwise pretty heavy movie. Mm-hmm. And I just appreciated that so much more the second time around. It was very good.
Another thing that I really appreciated about this movie that I feel like we also need to discuss was just like the visual experience of it. I mentioned this when we were talking about, actually Ragnarok was also like this, but the A Wrinkle in Time movie, that like a fundamental part of why I loved that movie so much was that I just found the visual experience of it to be so delightful. And I think in a very different way, but I think that is probably also true of my like basic I'm into this takeaway. I don't deal well with like anything that has gore, and there's definitely a bit of it here, but aside from one scene, I could not look away. The one scene was when they were cutting open his stomach, and that I had to not. That was the one where I was like, nah, I'm out. And it was so long, and even with my head turned away, you could hear the noises. That one was rough. But other than that, I did not look away at any point, just because the visuals were so entrancing and interesting, even when it was a little, bloody for my taste.
We finished recording an episode yesterday from whenever we're recording this one. I know that means nothing to you guys listening, but yesterday we finished recording an episode, and Nicole made a comment about how she was going to start watching the movie, and I was kind of going back and forth about whether I would or I would just try and kind of squeeze it all in today. And Nicole sent me a message and was like, maybe you should watch it because it's like dark outside at nighttime, and this is kind of like spooky. I did not know a ton about this movie. I'd seen maybe trailers here or there, but I didn't pay a lot of attention. So I was immediately like, oh no, what did Rich do? Like, I cannot handle this. Yeah, I was like, I can't do this at all. But it was definitely thrillery, but I don't think it was spooky at any moment. The only time I had to turn my head and not look was when they were cutting into his stomach. And I think it did a good job of something A Wrinkle in Time did that I thought was great, was that it captured a lot of the spirit of the movie and how it was like framing things. So it felt very magical and curious. And I think this one felt very uncomfortable and off balance sometimes. I think the best example of that is when they first get to camp and Natalie Portman is like waking up. The way that they frame that whole thing, and when you're like looking out at the shimmer and how I felt off balance. I was like, whoa, what's going on? And they capture so many of those moments of the creepiness, but also like this discovery of the land, of the animals and all of the genetic mutation, like the way that they explore all of that, I thought was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, just by, again, that first scene in the shimmer, they just establish it very quickly, very easily. Just, we've already lost 3 to 4 days. That's okay. Boom, already off kilter.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that is maybe worth discussing, I don't know that I have too many thoughts or feelings on this, but I'm curious whether the portrayal of the science was something that you have feelings about. I am not a science person, and I generally am like low. Like when people complain about like the science in a thing being bad, my immediate reaction is like, I would not have thought that. Like, I wouldn't have even had that thought if you hadn't told me just now. And so it's low on the list of things that bother me. But I know that like obviously there are other things that I do know a lot about that I get very frustrated when I feel like stories are violating like things that you could learn in your 9th grade civics class. I can sympathize with where that complaint is coming from, but it's also not something that I don't know. For me, I'm ambivalent about it also because I think that that there are like metaphorical uses to the sort of weird nonsense science of the refraction, but I'm curious whether that was something that ever took you out of it, or I don't know if you have feelings about it at all. I
majored in a science field when I was in college.
Scientist.
And then I quit. So, and I went to a humanities major. So that's how I feel about science. But generally, I can pick up on something if it's super blatant. So in Doctor Who, for instance, like that science, I'm like, this is shit because, it's really, really shit. But here, I don't think it ever took me out of the story. I think that you run into dangerous territory when you either over-explain or under-explain. And whether or not you know what's going on or if you know it's possible, if you leave any kind of hole or if you start doing too much work in the way of explanation where you can start really questioning like, wait. So I think that for me, in my general not knowing much about science because I quit, I think this towed a line of like doing just enough that I was like, okay, I see you giving a nod to science, but it didn't spend so much time there that I thought to question it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like for sure. And like down to like a molecular level, like, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've looked in a microscope. I don't exactly remember what a cell looks like, particularly if it's all spiky like that. But I feel like it did a really good job of, like, I never felt super like left behind by the science. And I actually thought that the idea of like what this whole thing is a prism was actually super engaging and easy for me to grasp because like, oh yeah, I know a prism. Oh, but for DNA? Okay. No, wait. Okay. Yes, I'm there. I'm with it. I see everything that's happening and it's bonkers and it allows you to do all sorts of different stuff. And I think they did a good enough job of like justifying exactly like what was happening and how it was happening, despite it being, like anytime you bring either alien technology or alien biology. That's the word. I was going to say biomechanics. It's like, well, that's a blend of the two.
So we got a lot of science knowledge here. Go on.
Exactly.
We're very qualified to have this conversation.
Well, that's the thing is like anytime you start bringing in like, oh, well, it's from outer space, so we could do all this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, that's a slippery slope where you can get down to all sorts of like crazy wackadoo stuff. And I think this was still very grounded and easy to wrap your head around while still being a weighty concept. And another thing that I saw, which I do also kind of get, is that it was all another big metaphor for cancer as well. And
right.
Yeah. And again, that kind of does bleed into the self-destruction type of thesis. But just kind of even, again, on a more molecular level, on a cellular level.
I think to this question, though, of the science, it's more that the idea that it's refracting everything, like shit should have been way weirder inside. Like the fact that it took them as long to mutate as it did, and quite frankly, the fact that the plant life that already was there wasn't weirder still if everything is being sort of perpetually refracted. Like I think that's the level at which is okay, it's refracting everything. I don't know. Like there's like that like house like structure that they a number of like built structures that they find that are still totally intact and whatnot. It's like there's that. I think like that's the level at which it seems kind of like blatantly like, well, it's not actually the thing that you've presented. I again come down on the side of I didn't care.
So like two things that I can think of here. One is that you work with so many science people. They're going to listen to this and laugh and laugh.
I know. Yeah, I know.
The other though is that I think they give us that whole explanation of the refraction, especially when Tessa Thompson, she's the one who brings it up and she kind of decides that this is what's happening. But I think by the end, when Natalie Portman is in that interrogation room or they're questioning her or whatever, they kind of leave the door open for you to kind of think, is that really what was happening? Because they kind of circle back around to the idea that it was the aliens, like whatever alien, they're the ones who were changing it. We don't know why. We don't know what they were doing or how they were changing or what their kind of thought process was. So they kind of leave it open-ended to, was it a refraction? Was it a prism? Or was it just this alien who landed here doing what aliens do, and they were making some copies, making some changes, but we don't necessarily know what their end game was, or the scientist guy asked her, why were they making these changes? And she's like, I don't know. Like, she has no idea either. And I think it's interesting because this is the first book. It's adapted from the first book, I think, in a trilogy. So the story continues. So I don't know. And obviously they left that open because the aliens make it to the outside, or the copies, or whatever they are at this point. So I think they definitely did.
How are you
going to
let them in the same room together after all that?
I know.
Yeah.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah.
Humans.
Yeah, I think it's not so much like a full on like crazy, like every single thing like gets refracted like at the beginning or towards the beginning of the movie when Kane just like first comes home, quote unquote Kane, like you see their hands like through the glass of water and like that sort of style of refraction, and it's like a really deliberate shot. And so like I think that also leaves room for them to kind of work in the idea of like echoes, and so it's not like a completely like splitting refraction as it is so much kind of like it's a warped version of what else is out there. Like, you know, everything that we saw still looked like what it was, but it was just slightly different. You know, like it was still an alligator, but it had some teeth things going on, and it was still a bear, but it could also, you know, take in the essence of whatever it just killed. And the house, when they get to that sort of like village or whatever it is, where like there's all the plant people, that house is an echo of Lena and Kane's house from like, and just from like the shots that, you know, you compare from the beginning of the movie to that point. And so, yeah, it's also supposed to be like all of these things sort of like still haunting all of these characters, you know, or more science or something.
It definitely is. As we sit here and talk about it, you can definitely like pinpoint that it is a little bit hand wavy, but I think probably because the science is not really the thing in this story, it is all of like that metaphor and like aliens and I don't know, weird. So if you sat here with somebody who can actually science, they probably could poke a ton of holes in it. But again, I just don't think that it mattered to me personally in this story.
Yeah, I would agree.
Also, another thing that I took a lot more notice to the second time around was the soundtrack and the music selection. A lot of like soft rock, yacht rock, basically. I think like the one actual song in the movie is a Crosby, Stills and Nash song, Helplessly Hoping. Which is like, yeah, a nice, like soothing, kind of like a Southern vibe to it that kind of juxtaposes this new kind of like Southern marshy experience that they're having. You would think it would be like a lot more harsh, but it's like, oh no, this is just going to be nice. And then of course, like the score towards the end of it, it's like very unnerving.
Yes.
I'm trying to decide if I noticed the score at all while I was watching, and I don't think that I did.
I definitely did notice. I just don't have anything else to add, but I definitely did notice it. Like it contributed a lot to that feeling of like being unmoored. And I think the fact that you brought up too, sort of the difference between the choice of basically the one like song versus the score, and like the difference in those two things, I think that also contributes to the overall feeling of just like feeling very unmoored while you watch it.
Yeah, and like I said, that wasn't even something I even super noticed the first time around. Just again, I'm kind of just going through what's left of my notes here. At that first base, did they really have a lot of reason to have like an Olympic sized pool there, or what was up with that? Just like, well, it'll be a good set piece for making this guy look like coral.
will file the pool under the science category.
I was just going to say, I was like, given how I don't give a shit we were about this science in this, given how
Fair.
I don't give a shit we were about the science in this movie whose main characters are several scientists,
Right.
I don't think that it's fair for us to now lament the pool size.
Good point. Fair. Definitely taken.
Any other notes we should address?
I feel like I've gone through pretty much all of my thoughts and feelings and notes on this. One thing I do want to ask, did anybody else get like, I feel like this falls between the cracks of most conversations, but between, you know, Oscar Isaac's character being named Cain and the whole conversation that Lena and Cain have like in bed towards the beginning of the movie, like, did anyone read into any of like the sort of biblical implications to any of this at all?
I would absolutely not pick up on those. This is a Mari question. Resident scientist and knower of the Bible.
Listen, just because Jesus was my first fandom.
Which was something that made me cackle out loud at work, by the
way. Now that you like mention it, that I totally did not pick up while watching it. I think this is definitely one of those things that as you continue to watch, you could probably just keep picking up on things. But that whole idea of it having you, like the word that Nicole used, unmoored, I think it just, what lands, it's almost spaghetti against the wall. Like you don't know what's going to land with whoever is watching. I mean, now that you mentioned that it's like Cain and that whole thing, I'm sure that there would be something there to talk about, especially because you have this entire idea of like anytime you have like some sort of like enclosed biome, there's a very Garden of Eden-esque thing there. I did not pick up on it while watching, and I would definitely need to like sit down and like think about what that meant in terms of the larger storytelling.
Because even just as you said, throwing spaghetti against the wall, I'm thinking like, well, it was towards the beginning of the movie and they never really harp on anything biblical after that. So was it just something to throw you off the scent? And now what I'm starting to think is that the more you watch this movie and the more multiple viewings you give it, it's like you yourself are getting further and further down that tunnel in the lighthouse and you're just losing all sense of yourself.
The shimmer.
I don't know who I am anymore.
Well,
please do me a favor. Don't ever watch this movie again.
The whole conversation is about whether God makes mistakes or whatnot. So, and then it's almost echoed at the end when you're talking about what are the motivations of these aliens or creatures or whatever it is that's in this enclosed biome as they're changing and forming this little mini Garden of Eden, this little mini world. Like, why did they make the changes that they did? I don't know. That's like as far removed from us as like understanding if God made mistakes or if God exists or if he was the one who formed or what was his motivation if you believe that he created certain things. Like, how did he mess with that? And the answer is like a big shrug. Like, we don't know.
Shruggy emoji. Sorry.
Right. So, that's my answer. There is definitely an echo now that I think about it from the beginning to the motivations of the aliens at the end. But the movie's entire take seems to be IDK.
Okay, so just as this movie started at the end, we're going to end at the start. We don't normally do this, but I want to circle back around to, did you like this? We talked about it. I want a final verdict. Did you like this movie? This is a quick yes or no. We've already talked about it. Rich.
Yes.
Mari.
Yes.
I also am landing on yes at the end. So, I'm glad we got there. You know, this conversation, much like this film, was a journey, and you know, and maybe I've come out changed on the other side. I don't know. I'm not sure. But on that note, we are going to end this episode of the podcast. Thank you again to Rich for joining us and recommending this wild ride of a movie. We would love to hear all of your thoughts about this movie. Please tell us all your theories. You can find us at SnarkSquad.com or on Twitter at Snark_squad. You can find me at Sweeney Says.
I'm at My Name is Marines.
And I am at Rich Cammy.
Thank you to Stefan Chin for the snazzy music that is playing us out right now. And we will be back in your ears again next week. Bye.
Bye.